Writing, a how-to workshop to help you start writing today. First of all, I'd like to do the land acknowledgement. We begin by acknowledging that we are in the Robinson Superior Treaty Territory and that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and specifically the Fort William First Nation. And also would like to acknowledge funding support from the Ontario Arts Council, an agency of the Government of Ontario. And I will go ahead and introduce the star of the evening, Graham Strong. He's a full-time freelance marketing writer, journalist, and ghostwriter, and has been a writer his entire life. He's the former editor-in-chief of the Argus, which is where I know him from. What year was that exactly, Graham? How long ago now? At least 30 years.
It's been a little while.
And helped transition it into one of the first digitally produced newspapers in North America. Graham won an honorable mention in Now's first writing contest in 1998 for his short story, Hat Trick. Professionally, Graham offers marketing writing services to businesses and organizations around the world. He also writes for several news outlets, including the Sudbury Mining Solutions Journal and the Northern Ontario Medical Journal, and has written for Canadian Press. In his spare time, he is writing his first novel. Graham lives in Thunder Bay with local potter, Noel Keag, and their three incredible sons. His favorite writers are Paul Corrington, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and Hunter S. Thompson. So Wes, we'll just hand it over to Mr. Strong.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, Laura. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. We might as well jump right into it. We should address questions too. If there are any questions, you can put them in the chat, or yeah, that's probably the best way as we go. And then Liz will let me know and stop me, and we can answer the questions. But there's going to be a lot of time for questions at the end as well. So let me just start my screen. We'll get started here. There we go. So yes. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Basics of Writing, a how-to guide to help you start writing today. Our goal today is to talk about some of the things that keep us from writing and how to overcome them. But first, a little bit of background for you. So when I was a Now board member, we talked about doing a workshop for beginner writers who wanted to learn the very basics of just getting started. We thought that at the beginning of January was a perfect time to present this because that's when Now starts its writing contest. So we thought it would be good to dovetail the two. I thought it was a great idea, and I thought it would be easy enough to put together. But when I sat down and I started planning the workshop, I realized that it was actually easier said than done. For one thing, the definition of the basics depends a lot on what type of writing you want to do. So for example, if we started talking about the basics of short story writing, we'd leave behind all you poets and memoirists and creative nonfiction writers, and that wouldn't do. So I wondered, well, are there any common challenges that all writers face no matter what we're writing? And I realized, yeah, actually there were quite a few. One of the first things that stood out for me was fear. There's a ton of information out there on how to become a better writer, but there's relatively little on why the hell does writing scare me so much? So I thought that'd be an interesting topic to look at. You might actually be comforted to know that writing scares the hell out of everyone from beginner to old pro, but we can all overcome it with a little bit of work. And that's what we're going to start doing with this workshop. It's why this workshop isn't just for beginners as well. I think there's lessons here for all writers, including the old pros. So let's start with a term that we've all heard of before, writer's block. It's a term I've never really liked, actually. We'll get into that a bit more later. But in my mind, writer's block isn't one single thing, but a bunch of different things that sort of work together and quash creativity. One of those things is fear, but actually there's many different kinds of fear.
Unmuted it yet?
There's fear of failure. Oh.
I won't have the screen.
I don't think you can.
There we go. There's fear of failure, fear of success, fear of embarrassment, fear of wasting time. There's a bunch of different fears. These are just a handful, but I think the most important one is fear of not being good enough. This last one, that's a pretty powerful fear. I think it's actually the core of all the fears. All the other fears, I think, basically point to that one core fear. So we could probably talk all night about that fear, but I don't think we want to do that. I think for the moment, we're just going to acknowledge that we all feel that fear at some time or another. We're all in the same boat. And what we're going to do is move on and try to find ways around it. So here's a quote by Neil Gaiman. I love this quote, actually. As a writer, don't fear to be yourself. It's absolutely true. Authenticity is also one of the main ingredients of great writing. So you need to be yourself. But then when I started thinking about this quote, I started thinking, well, okay, that's great, Neil Gaiman. Easy for you to say. But how do I go about not being afraid to be me? Well, that's part of what we're going to talk about here too. So what we'll learn. So we're going to talk about serious fun. That's one of my key concepts. We'll start with that. We're going to talk about setting your writing goals, making time to write, conjuring a ritual, facing the blank page, overcoming imposter syndrome, giving yourself permission to play. And then at the end, we're going to have a lot of time for questions. One of the things I realized putting together this workshop last year, and in fact, presenting this workshop last year, is that the whole idea of the basics of writing is a pretty broad spectrum of topics, and we're not going to cover nearly all of them here. So at the end, there'll be lots of time for questions. Feel free to ask about questions directly related to this workshop, or if you have any general questions about getting started writing or writing in general, then by all means, whatever, everything's open game. But let's start talking about what serious fun is. So serious fun, I define serious fun as taking a professional approach to making time to write, but then giving yourself permission to play with the words once you've sat down. So what exactly does that mean? Well, here's the thing. Too many writers sit down to do serious writing. I know I was guilty of this for the longest time. It's obvious why writers do this. You sit down to write a short story or a poem or whatever, and of course, you want to make it the best it can be. But here's the thing. Concentrating on making it good actually makes it bad. It's kind of like watching someone get camera shy. We've all seen it. I'm doing it right now. One moment, a person can be funny, outgoing, and interacting with a group of people. But then someone says, hey, let's get this on video. And suddenly that person clams up, becomes self-conscious, and it looks like they're trying too hard. Sitting down to do some serious writing produces the same sort of effect. Your writing becomes stilted and forced and unimaginative because you just can't get out of your head. So serious writing breaks down to this. Be serious about sitting down to write. But once you're sitting down, your job is simply to play with the words, at least for the first few drafts. The more fun you have, the more original and imaginative your writing will be. And the more productive you'll be as well. 1,000 bad words are worth way more than 3 good ones, because you can turn those 1,000 words into something great. But more on that later too. First, we're going to talk about setting goals. So one way you can go about not fearing to be yourself is to set some writing goals. But before we set some concrete writing goals, we should consider what we overall want to accomplish as a writer. Some possible choices include becoming a professional or a published writer, simply doing it for fun with no real expectations, do it for fun but wanting to improve as you go along, complete a specific writing project such as a memoir, a poem, a short story, a novel, whatever. And yeah, these are just a few different ideas that, everyone's got their own reasons for why they want to write. So it's not really crucial at this particular second to know what your long-term goal is, but it is good to start thinking about it because it is going to affect a few of the other things that we're talking about in a few minutes here. So regardless of what your answer is about the long-term goals, a good way to start writing is to set a very specific goal. Give yourself a specific writing project, like a poem, a short story, an article, whatever it is that you write. Make time to write by putting together a schedule. This will keep you well scheduled. um, yeah, and then another way to go about it is to pick sort of an easy project. And what I think is one of the easiest projects is a writing contest. That's because it gives you a deadline. It also gives you specs like word count. Quite often they have themes as well, so you can write to the theme. And obviously, one of the ones that I'm very happy with is the Now Writing Contest, which the 24th annual one just launched on January 1st. So this is actually, I think, the perfect goal for you to set for anyone who's looking for a goal. There's several categories, including poetry, shorts, fiction, creative nonfiction. The Bill McDonald Prize alternates between fiction and nonfiction. It's nonfiction this year. And then we have a category that changes every year. And this year, that category is BIPOC personal essay. So the reason that the Now Writing Contest is a very easy and attainable goal is because it's the closing date's February 28th, so it gives you 7 weeks to submit. I think that's the ideal amount of time. It's enough time to give you lots of time to finish your piece, but it's also short enough that you don't have to start fretting over it. Making time to write. But in order to reach any writing goal, you have to make time to write. That's what this quote is all about. It's not about finding the time, it's about making writing a priority in your life. One of the first questions new writers will ask, well, how often should I write? Again, that directly relates to your writing goals as well as whatever else you have going on in your life. Full-time professional writers write every day. So if you want to become a professional writer, writing every day should be your goal. If you're doing it just for fun or you only want to write once per week, that's absolutely fine as well. Other people write in spurts. They'll write every day if they have a specific project in mind. And if they don't have a project on the go, perhaps they'll write less or not at all. The next question is then, how should I plan to write? Again, another subjective question. Even among full-time writers, the answer are all over the map. So Hemingway once said that whenever he's working on a book or story or whatever, he starts writing at about 6 a.m. He'll work until he gets to a place where he knows what's going to happen next, so he can put it down and then start off right out of the gate the next day. He figured that he spent about 6 hours writing or so. Maya Angelou said that she wrote from 7 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, and then she did edits afterwards. Stephen King says that he writes 6 good pages per day. Ray Bradbury wrote a short story per week and read a short story every night before bed. And Alice Munro said that she wrote 7 days a week from about 8 to 11:30 in the morning and kept a strict quota of pages. So you see in this just one small sample size, we see that some writers committed to a specific number of hours, some to a specific number of pages, some wrote every day without fail, other ones wrote just when they had a specific project to work on. One had a weekly quota instead of a daily one. In fact, every writer has a different approach. So what will work best for you? Well, that might take some experimentation. Here's some suggestions though. You can write for X number of days, X number of hours per day or per week. You can write for X number of words per day or per week. You can plan to write a short little bit, like an Instagram poem or something like that every day or every week. You could write 4 hours every Saturday and every Sunday. You could write 2,000 words every weekend. Personally, I find that writing for a specific amount of time is easier than committing to a word count. That's because some days the words flow and other days they just don't. So if I put in, say, like a solid hour of honest work, I can feel good about myself whether I wrote 100 words or 2,000. But on the other hand, if I take 6 hours trying to reach 500 words and fail, I don't feel good about myself at all. But again, that's just my personal experience and everyone's different. What matters most is what is going to help you and motivate you to sit down and write. And the schedule itself doesn't really much matter, except that if you want to be a professional writer, then you're going to want to write every day. But other than that, whatever you need in terms of motivating yourself to write is what you should decide to schedule. But once you do, just stick to that schedule, because the schedule is useless unless you follow it. But that being said, too, be open to changing your schedule, especially in the beginning. If you find that you want to write at night instead of the morning, then change to that. If a time limit isn't working for you and you want to try writing to a specific number of words every day, you can change to that too. But tweaks aside, in order for the schedule to work, you need to commit to that schedule no matter what. That no matter what can be tough some days, because there's always going to be distractions. Some are manageable, like the laundry. Others are not, like the kids. So if you have many responsibilities, then give yourself permission to be flexible when it comes to committing to a schedule. But there are a few things that you can do to reduce distractions, especially the manageable ones. Create a writing space, preferably with a door that you can close. Put away electronics, including your phones. Don't open your web browser. If there are too many distractions at home, go elsewhere, like a library or a coffee shop. Conjure a ritual, which we'll get to in a second. But to sum up 2 main points, write as often as possible. The best way to get better as a writer is to write every day. Committing to a regular writing schedule helps you reach your goals no matter what schedule works best for you. And don't just wait for inspiration. The idea here is to allow yourself time and space to focus purely on your writing. When you do that, you'll find that inspiration will start coming to you more and more the moment you sit down to write. So conjuring a ritual, this can help the process along. Those rituals of getting ready to write produce a kind of trance state. As this quote suggests, a ritual can help you prepare yourself for writing, but it can also help you get into the habit of writing. That makes writing way easier. The ritual can help you get into your writing frame of mind, or that trance state that Barth called it. I don't know about you, but when I'm writing, I'm usually not present in the real world. The ritual becomes like a door you pass through from the real world to that place in your mind where you write best. Form a positive writing habit. Over time, the ritual will help you commit more to your writing. Our brains sometimes start playing games with us, giving us excuses for why we shouldn't write. And you end up checking out what's on TV instead. The ritual tricks your brain into thinking it's doing something it really wants to do. Maybe your ritual is to make a cup of that special grind coffee you have in the cupboard just for writing. Once you've made that coffee, there's no going back. Get rid of distractions. Or probably more accurately, a ritual helps you ignore distractions. Like the first point, as you pass through into your writing frame of mind, you're less likely to become distracted anyway. You know what it's like when you're zoned in on something. It's hard to draw your attention away. But in a more physical sense, you can make getting rid of your distraction as part of your ritual as well. Hiding your phone, closing your web browser, shutting the door, and so on. Wake up your muses and get the creativity flowing. Being in the writing frame of mind doesn't always translate to being creative. Start thinking about what you want to write as you are going through your ritual. That way your thoughts will be running, which will help you get your creativity flowing as well. So in a way, a ritual is almost like Pavlov's dog, that famous experiment in which Pavlov taught a dog how to salivate by ringing a bell every time he fed it. By the end of the experiment, the dog would salivate at the ringing of the bell, even if there wasn't any food. That's sort of what we want to do. We want to trick our minds to start thinking creatively with some positive reinforcement and get our minds salivating by the time we're ready to sit down and write. So here's Stephen King talking about his ritual. I have a glass of water or a cup of tea. I sit down somewhere between 8 and 8:30 every morning, have a vitamin pill, my music, sit in the same seat. All the papers are arranged in the same places. Doing these things the very same way every day says to my mind, you're going to be dreaming soon. I have a ritual as well when I'm working on novels. I brew some tea. Lately, it's been London Fog, and I get myself two novel writing cookies. And yes, I call them novel writing cookies. They're actually the Vortman fudge striped oatmeal cookies, but I only eat them when I'm working on a novel, and that's important. I need to keep them special because otherwise it wouldn't have the same effect. So, how do you make your ritual? I know it sounds easy, but there are a few key things that you should include just to make sure that it works for you. Make it special, like those novel writing cookies I have. Again, it's a positive reinforcement. If you have something reserved only for when you're writing, it's a treat of sorts. It's kind of like a double whammy. And when I say treat, it doesn't have to be a cookie or candy or something sweet. You could have a special tea or coffee or maybe a particular type of apple. It doesn't have to be something to eat or drink either. Maybe it's a Lego minifigure you pull out from the drawer and put on yourself when you're writing. Maybe it's something, it's just has to be something that makes you happy and will help get you in the right frame of mind. Involves some sort of physical activity. So this doesn't have to be a workout. The physical part could be as little as just making tea. Many writers do go for a walk or do push-ups. You could take a shower, you could put on special clothes, you could rearrange a set of Star Wars figurines on your bookshelf, anything that gets your body moving in a precise, somewhat repeatable pattern. This will help your mind go into its trance state. And as I was writing this, I realized if any of you know about tea rituals, this is the same kind of idea. I don't happen to know a whole lot about it, but as far as I know, it's the physical act of making the tea and that same precise steps helps to relax the body. But again, I'm no expert. If it's something that appeals to you, then look it up. I know there's a lot of information out there about tea rituals. You might find some inspiration there as well. But whatever you choose to do, make sure you do it roughly the same thing every time. For example, you don't want to walk one day and then make tea the next day. You certainly can do both. And many people go for a walk when they're stuck, for example, and that's great. But in terms of the ritual, it's better to make it the same activity every single time. Again, it's that repetition as much as anything that's important. Soon you'll be doing the steps without even thinking, which will free up your brain to start working creatively. However, if you find it's not working for you, don't beat it to death. By all means, try something different. Don't multitask during your ritual, like texting or reading the news. Again, your mind should be losing focus with the world around you and starting to turn inward. You want to fall away from the world, not involve yourself in it. And that includes talking with other people. Avoid people while you're doing a ritual if you can, although obviously this can be difficult sometimes if you have family around. Start to think about what you might want to write today. You can start by thinking about what you wrote yesterday. That always helps. You can think about your characters. You can think about the storyline, anything that gets your mind working and start the creativity flowing. So again, the idea is to purge the mind of daily thoughts and start putting yourself in that trance or dreamlike state to write. Okay, so I thought we'd do a short little writing exercise, very easy, uh, just to go over all the stuff that we talked about here. I thought it might be good for you to start thinking about what your overall goal is, schedule some writing time, what you're going to do to fight distractions, and what you might do as a pre-writing ritual. So I'll give everyone a few minutes here to take a look at that, and we'll be back shortly. Okay, it's kind of hard to tell over Zoom how everyone's doing. It's kind of looking like everyone's had some time to write some stuff down. So yeah, so we'll go onwards. So filling the blank page. Okay, so I mentioned before, I believe the term writer's block is actually a catch-all phrase that describes many different things happening, either separately or together. There are fears, which we already touched on a little bit. There's not having anything to, or not being able to think of anything to say. There's having something to say, but not feeling ready to say it. There's imposter syndrome. There's being too serious about your writing. There's not dealing with distractions very well. There's self-doubt. There's anxiety over other parts of your life, and there's many, many other factors. But whatever you want to call it, the result is the same. You're not putting down words on the page. These fears and doubts literally kill creativity, leaving you staring dumbly at your laptop. This is how Hemingway would solve the problem. All you have to do is write one true sentence. Write the truest sentence that you know. This is actually a pretty famous quote. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have heard this before, but still it's a little cryptic. So I'm going to explain it by giving some background. In his memoir, A Movable Feast, about his Paris days, Hemingway talks about sitting in a cafe one morning with nothing in particular to say. He was blocked, if you want to call it that. But of course, he had to write because this was his writing time. So he tried to think of one true sentence, which he described as something he heard or read or knew, something that obviously struck a chord with him. When that truth came to him, it would spark his imagination and he would start writing. But this story is a little fanciful. Hemingway was accused of revisionist history in A Movable Feast. So we do have to take this revelation with a grain of salt. But I do think the lesson is still valid. If you find your one true sentence, you can start from there. So let's be a little more clear about what that one true sentence is. So to me, the one true sentence is that kernel of truth that resonates with you and inspires you. Another writer, Abby Emmons, says that in order to write, you have to start with a truth that you want to scream from the rooftops. Essentially, then it's the theme of what you want to write. What truth do you care about so deeply that you have to share it with everyone? What makes you happy? What makes you angry? What makes you sad? In Gatsby, Fitzgerald wanted to shout about the American dream. In Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption, King wanted to shout about hope and freedom. And then, of course, there's Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Starts with, "It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife." I think we've all heard that line too. You can almost imagine her writing this like that line down and just starting from there. So really, your one true sentence is just boils down to, what do you want to say? A lot of the fighting the blank page is deciding what we want to write about. In fact, it's probably most of it. Remember when I listed some of the causes of writer's block, the first thing on the list after fears was not being able to think of anything to say. So it's an important decision. Like Abby Emmons said, it's something you should want to shout from the rooftops. It also has to be something the reader is going to care about. It starts with that one kernel of truth that resonates with us. It starts with your one true sentence. So how do you find your one true sentence? Well, there are a few practical ways that you can do. You can write a memory from childhood, something that was emotionally charged or maybe even painful. You can write a story from a news item you heard recently, something that struck you as important. You can use writing prompts. Chapters has books of them, even though it's easy enough to find something online. You can start writing a passage from a book, a poem, or a movie that you remember until you can't remember any more of it. Excuse me, and then you just start making it up yourself. You can write down a dream that you had, either recently or one of those recurring dreams that we all have. You can write down a conversation that you heard and then start making up whatever you didn't hear after. You can write a letter. You can write a letter to the editor or to your mother or to anyone you like. You're not going to send this letter. You're just going to write it as if you're describing something that happened to you recently or even something that happened to you in the past. And again, these things in themselves may not be the stories or poems or blog posts or whatever you're ultimately going to write. But the idea is that you're simply starting to get words down. Just write sentence after sentence, or if you're writing poetry, just write line after line. You don't really have to think about what you're writing, and don't analyze it before you write it down or even after. It's kind of like brainstorming. You just write whatever comes to your mind. At some point, you're going to write something that will strike a chord with you, and you'll stop and you'll think, there's something there. And you're going to want to explore that something, and it's going to spark your imagination, and it'll take you somewhere where you want to go. And then, hey, look out, you're writing. Another part of writer's block is imposter syndrome. I chose this one again because it's something that affects new and experienced writers. For example, here's Maya Angelou. I've written 11 books, but each time I think, oh, they're going to find me out. Here's another writer you may have heard of, Margaret Atwood. Much of what we set out to accomplish ends in failure, at least in our own eyes. Advice for the innocent pilgrim: you never step into the same river twice. The vast empty spaces of the blank page appall, and everyone walks into the maze blindfolded. So if Margaret Atwood gets imposter syndrome, I think there's hope for all of us. A full disclosure about this quote, it's heavily edited. I edited it for length and clarity, and it's actually 2 quotes put together, but it's all Atwood's words. So if you're going to look it up, you might not find exactly what's written here. But I quoted both Angelou and Atwood on purpose because I wanted to underline that every writer faces imposter syndrome at some point or another, no matter how famous or successful they are. And this is something that many writers are surprised to hear, I think. In fact, I like to think that feeling like an imposter just may be proof that you actually are a real bona fide writer. So what is imposter syndrome? The term itself is mostly self-explanatory, but let's be crystal clear. It's that feeling writers get that makes them say to themselves, well, who the hell do I think I am, and why would anyone want to read what I have to say? It's tied into self-doubt and, of course, into fears. It's difficult to read someone like Margaret Atwood and not wonder, am I good enough? I mean, how can anyone write after thinking about that? But here's the thing, though. Writers do it every day. Choose any writer who's won the Giller Prize in the last 20 years, and dollars to donuts, they've read Atwood. And then they've sat down to fill that blank page. And hey, they even won a Giller. Now, not everyone's going to win a Giller, but I don't know any writer who's worked at their goals and didn't get some recognition for their work in some way. Even if it didn't come today, if it doesn't come tomorrow, it'll come at some point if you just keep at it, even if your name isn't Atwood. Now, if imposter syndrome was just a casual passing feeling, I probably wouldn't mention it at all at this workshop. But the thing is, it stops writers from writing. They sit down at the blank page and self-doubt starts to creep in. And the crazy thing is, writers get worried about what people are going to think about their writing before they've even written a word. There's no way you could even know how good or bad it is because it doesn't exist yet. So here's some concrete ways on how to overcome imposter syndrome. Focus on your work, not what other writers are doing. You're not in competition with other writers. Think about what you want to say, not what other writers are writing or how they might say it. Remember that comparisons are completely useless. Who's a better writer, Margaret Atwood or J.K. Rowling, or Neil Gaiman, or Shakespeare? The reality is they're all completely different writers, and for the most part, they have completely different audiences. And they all have readers who all say they're the best. So most importantly, though, here is that there's room in the world for all 4, and actually many, many more writers. Remember all those times you said to yourself, I could have written that? We've all come across some published words that we've shaken our head at, wondering, well, how'd they get published? Sometimes it borders on confusion, despair, or even anger. How does that person get published when I can't? Well, you have an opportunity to prove that you can do better every time you sit down to write. please yourself first. This is actually, I think, one of the best ways to help shake off imposter syndrome. Because you know what? Nobody can write the way you do. Nobody can write the topics you want to write. Nobody can write in the way you want to write them. You find your story, you find your one true sentence using the words you want to use, and you can never go wrong. So to recap then, you're not in competition with any other writers. All comparisons are useless anyway. And nobody can write the way you want to write. So just please yourself first. And we're going to go back to Neil Gaiman's quote here. As a writer, don't fear to be yourself. So I think just 45 minutes in, this quote is beginning to make a little bit more sense, isn't it? Giving yourself permission to play. One of the things on the writer's block list that was being too serious about your writing. That's a killer of creativity as well. Here's George Orwell. When I sit down to write a book, I do not say to myself, I'm going to produce a work of art. And that's it in a nutshell. If you go into your writing session with a plan to write the next great Canadian novel, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. Don't get me wrong, each one of us has the opportunity to write the great Canadian novel or poem or whatever, but approach is everything. I think part of the problem is that writing is the most literal art. We have this strange expectation that the words are floating in our heads will form perfect sentences in front of us. We'll see words as something solid, something we can grasp and put onto paper in perfect order like a ticker tape. If only we could be serious for a moment and concentrate. Is that really reasonable? My wife is a potter, as Laura mentioned at the beginning. She makes all these incredible mugs and teapots and Christmas ornaments from clay, and I'm always amazed at how she does it. I mean, I know how she does it, and it takes many, many steps to make a teapot, as you can imagine. So let me ask you this. Do you think potters should expect their clay to just turn into a fully formed teapot the moment they throw the clay onto the wheel? Of course not. Yet so many writers get discouraged when they can't essentially do the same thing. Whatever you put down on paper first is most often not what ends up on the paper at the end. That first draft, that's just throwing a lump of clay down onto the wheel. It's not supposed to look like a teapot at this point, and it would be pretty freaky if it did. The goal then is just to get those words down on the paper in whatever order they come, just like a lump of clay. Then you go back and you start turning them into a teapot. Or, to put it the way Hemingway would put it, so if you go into a writing session expecting that your best work should be on the page the first go around, not only are you going to be sorely disappointed, you're going to get discouraged. And that's when the fears and doubts creep back in, killing creativity again. The only way to be creative then is to move away from the serious writing and start having fun. Here are a few ways to do that. Sit down and write without thinking. So you don't sit down to write the next great Canadian anything. You're writing whatever words come to you, good or bad. Just have fun with it. You'll decide how good those words actually are later. Expect that greatness won't come until later. And again, back to Hemingway, expect no gold will flow from your pen when you're filling that blank page the first time around. Write with wild abandon, edit seriously. The best ideas come when you're having fun and basically brainstorming your story or your poem or your whatever. The thing is, you won't recognize those words as your best ideas until you're editing them later. Just write without caring about what they are. Don't decide you're writing something to submit. Write it first and then decide. That takes the pressure off so you can just play. If it looks good after all your writing and editing, great. Submit it somewhere. But if it doesn't, that's great too. You had fun and the experience of writing it. So now start writing something else. Don't worry about wasted words. This is something that happens way, way too often, in my opinion. You're going to cut words. You're going to cut sentences and paragraphs. You're going to cut thousands and thousands of words in your lifetime. Most prolific writers cut millions. But even so, there's no such thing as wasted words. Even the ones you cut somehow affected the words you kept. That means your work is better in two ways. It's better because it's trimmer, but it's also better because of the way that those words, those cut words, improve the words that stay behind. So we're going to do another short little writing exercise here. It's all about having fun. I want everyone to start thinking of some ideas you might want to write about, like a memory or a dream or a news item, anything that interests you. Jot down several ideas in bullet points, and don't worry if it's not your one true sentence right off the bat. Though if it is, that's going to be great. Just give yourself some ideas about what to write the next time you sit down to write. I also want you to list everyone you're in competition with when you're writing. And what happens if you write something you don't like? Describe how you might get arrested, how the sky might fall, what you'll do to fix your writing, and how you avoid being too serious the next time you write. Now, a couple of those are kind of jokey, but you get the point. I'll give everyone a few minutes here to start thinking about what they might want to write next time around. Okay. Again, it's kind of hard to see everyone out there in Zoom land, but I think most people had enough time to write down a few ideas. So yeah, before we end here, I do have a few tips for new writers who do want to get better with their craft. The top 3 tips are: number 3, join a writers group. And I can't stress this one enough. Can't stress enough how helpful this is. Meeting and talking with other writers helps you improve as a writer, gives you a sense that you're not writing on your own, and inspires you to write. Learn to type faster. This is actually one of my go-to tips all the time. Personally, I've found that sometimes the ideas and words come to me faster than I can get them down. If you learn to type faster, you're less likely to run into this problem, and you're actually going to get more words down per hour. Plus, you're more likely to disrupt your writing flow if you have to stop every time to look for the W on the keyboard. Lastly, and this one almost goes without saying, but read. And we've probably all heard this, but it's worth reinforcing. This is easily the single most important tip for all writers. Reading is almost like exercise for your brain when you're not writing. Not only that, you learn so much from other writers about story structure and technique and voice and more just by reading. And if you've heard of reading with intent, reading with purpose, that's even better. That's something that if you get into the habit of that, you're really going to improve your writing that way. We're going to go back to Stephen King one last time here. If you want to be a writer, you must do two things above all else: read a lot and write a lot. There's no way around these two things that I'm aware of, no shortcut. But the one thing that I want everyone to take away from this workshop is this: have fun with your writing. Play with the words, frolic with phrases, write because you enjoy it. Then go back and see if it's something worth showing to other people. If it's not, write it some more, edit, polish, rewrite it to the point that people will like it. But through the whole process, always have fun. It's like that old adage, smiling increases your face value. Well, enjoying your writing process will increase your book value. Write like nobody's watching, because you know what? Nobody is. Not until you're ready to show it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Graham. That was wonderful. We have some comments in the chat. Jodine is very glad that the cookies ritual has been maintained since your last presentation. Crystal Donahue is, this is great. I'm taking notes. Phil asked, what is imposter syndrome? I think he's answered your question, Phil.
Yeah.
Phil's nodding. And Jeff Burchell is offering another Hemingway quote: write drunk, edit sober. And then lots of very thank yous helps. I can't read it the next day.
No,
because I write by hand. It's just, no, it's hopeless. And so, yeah, we'll just open up the floor for questions. I'll keep an eye on the whole gang here.
Yeah, again, any questions at all? It doesn't have to be related directly to the workshop, but whatever questions. We kind of opened it up last year. It worked really well. So yeah.
Yeah. Everyone's just being quiet. Oh, there's no Lori. Laurenowicz. Atwood said at the talk at chapters that there is no such thing as writer's block, just lack of research.
That might be one way to put it. Again, writer's block. One of the things about writer's block, I think, is not knowing what you want to say. Research is certainly going to help that.
Samantha Plavins asks, do you discourage the system of plotting out the arc of storyline, or is it better to do this?
Wow, we could do a whole workshop on that, I think. That's pantsing versus planning. I think that's a personal choice as well. There's a lot of, I tend to be a pantser, so I tend to be the type of person that just starts writing and I'll see what comes out of it and take it from there. But there are a lot of people who plan as well. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. I think it's, again, a personal choice. The one thing to remember, though, either way, if you're writing, for example, fiction, there are some pretty, you need to follow a certain structure, or it's better to follow a certain structure anyway. So whether you're planning everything from the beginning, or if you're just writing by the seat of your pants and then gonna pull it together into a novel, either way, you have to have the final product as being somewhat structured, and that's sometimes hard to do when you're not planning. And planning is also helpful too for a lot of beginner writers, because in that way you can sort of pace yourself a bit better. Um, but again, there's a lot of writers who've had many novels that they plan every single novel. So yeah, so personal preference. I think the best way to do it is to do it both ways and see what works best for you.
Okay, Phil, did you have your hand up?
Oh, yeah,
I
I
see
was
Phil's
just
hand up.
thinking about, what about reading chapters or parts of it to someone as you go along? Getting their comments.
As you go along, I'm always hesitant about that personally. Again, it's a personal choice. And my experience has been that a lot of writers, if not most writers, don't like sharing it until it's done. And there's a few reasons for that. I think one is, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right to me anyway. Again, a personal thing. But the other thing is, you don't want people necessarily affecting what your story is until you have it down. So once, like I've given stuff to people to write once I'm happy with what's there. Again, knowing that there's going to be ways to improve it. That's why you give it to beta readers to look at, and they'll say, well, fix this, or, I like this, or I don't like that, so on. But again, for me anyway, that's very far in the process. I have to have something that's together and ready to present before I show it to people. But again, personal preference. If you're stuck on a chapter and you're not sure if it's working, or if you want feedback on that chapter before you go to the next one, there's no chapter police out there. You can do whatever you want. It's your work. But for me personally, I do like to have it all together in what I consider to be a semi-finished fashion, just so that I do have my ideas and my feelings and my everything on the paper first.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There's a question from Louise on the chat. How much is too much detail when describing a scene, an item, etc.?
Well, it depends. If you're Hemingway, then you don't have a whole lot of leeway. But if you're writing in the 19th century, you got a ton of leeway. That's another tough one. I tend to be the one that writes a lot of detail, and there's actually a running joke among a lot of people in this group here about my sunset scene that went on for pages and ended up being about 3 sentences by the end. So yeah, I do like going into a lot of detail, but the reality is the readers, and especially readers today, tend not to. So how much is too much? It's hard to say without looking at something. But in general, less is more these days. Okay. Again, once you get into the 19th century writers and all those guys that wrote by the word, got paid by the word, you're going to see a lot of things. And if you enjoy those type of books, there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. So again, are we talking about something that you want to put out there for publication, or is it just your own personal writing style? If you're writing for yourself.
So I think sometimes it's just a matter of, I get so engrossed in what I'm writing. Like I just want to make sure that some of the details really have to be detailed. So I want to bring the reader in so they can see it just like I see it. And sometimes it's not a lot. Sometimes I feel like if I don't put that information there, they're going to miss out on that little. So I'm kind of struggling a little bit where, is it too much? I guess once the story is kind of almost done, maybe that's where I'll see where it went and what really needs to be more, more elaborate, and maybe some stuff scaled down a bit. So I just don't want to
Yeah.
lose the reader, where at the beginning they may be, oh my God, it's way too long. It's not long as in like 5 pages, but
Yeah.
that's where I'm kind of afraid. So I guess it would just be a matter of seeing where the story goes, maybe. So like you're saying,
That's-
sometimes, you know.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. This was my experience. And again, I tend to write the longer, more detailed stuff. The feedback I was getting was that, it's too long, too detailed. So what I've been consciously trying to do is filling in the details here and there and expecting that the reader is going to, just take those little nuggets and the
Okay.
picture is going to form in their head. Important details, like if it's really important that the car is red, then make sure that you mention that the car is red, for example.
Okay.
But if it doesn't really matter, then, you don't necessarily have to say red, or, you could say that it's beat up, or you could say it's, whatever. Unless the details are very specific, need to be in there, then, just throw in small details just so
Okay.
the reader gets the hang of it and they can,
Okay.
make their own interpretations. That's
that's
what I've
good.
been working on anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. It's good because you don't want to lose them the first, the
No.
first half a page you're gone. Thank you. Thank you very
Well,
much.
yeah. Oh, yeah. And sorry,
Yeah.
I just want to build on what you just said there too. That's important too. What the other thing I've been doing is that, if there's action and stuff, I tend to put fewer details in. And then if there's room to sort of expand a bit, then I'll get into a little more detail. Again, being very conscious of, the detail should serve the reader, not serve me. That's a big thing. But yeah, if you're in more action, then have fewer details. And if you have time to sort of expand, that's where you can put in some of the more detailed stuff. Again, in my experience. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. Good luck with that.
Well, let's see. Just another comment from Griselda. Thank you for your tips. Very helpful. Don't see any more right now.
There has to be more questions.
I just thought that, it's just a comment. I just wanted to mention, if my microphone's working, I hope it is. Yeah, I think it is.
You're working, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. About the
Crystal.
writing ritual, I thought was a really good point. I used to have a writing ritual back when I used to write more regular, and then I just kind of stopped. And then I used Scrivener, so I put Scrivener on full screen earlier today to get some writing done, and I just completely blanked out, and I was like, you know what? I don't have my routines, and it's what you mentioned about the rituals and stuff.
Yeah, it's I find it really interesting, the whole psychology behind it. I mean, I don't know why it works, but it just does. I guess, again, you're putting in your mind into that trance state, but why is making tea, why does that put you in a trance state? I don't know, but yeah, it works. And like you said, I think it's more important for some people than others. Like my day job writing, I just sit down and start. Like I don't need a ritual, but the creative stuff, well, that's the wrong way to put it. I'm still creative in the day job, but you know what I mean? I guess writing fiction, I have to be, get myself into that mindset, whereas I don't so much with the marketing writing. So yeah. Well, there you go. Well, hopefully you'll get back on your ritual and start writing again.
I hope so.
Thanks.
There's a question from Jodine. What are your favorite books on writing? Do you have any go-tos?
Oh, I do. Oh, and I can't remember the name of it. I just came across one really good one not too long ago. Do I have any up here? Oh, I should have actually done that. Brought a couple of books out. There is one that's called, I can't remember either one of them, but yes, I do. If you give me two,
well, maybe you can look
here.
them up later, and we'll post them. We'll post them.
Yeah,
on
that
the
sounds
website
good.
or something.
Let's do that. Yeah, that sounds good. Oh, there you go.
Oh, Vera,
Samantha.
maybe you can.
Sorry, Samantha just mentioned one, Story Genius. That is one, because I told her that was one of my go-to books. It's a really good book for plotting if you're doing short stories, or mostly it's for novels, I think, but it would work for short stories as well. It's helpful for finding out what your character's motivations are scene by scene, and creating that tension and being able to sustain that tension over the whole novel, which is really important. I found that very helpful.
What was it called again?
Okay.
Story Genius.
And Vera, maybe you can speak to your workshop in, I think it's what, later this month? Because
Not to undercut.
At the less is.
Less
That's fine.
is
No,
more.
it's good. We should always, yeah.
There's a haiku workshop on the 25th of January. I'm doing it. And not to undercut Graham's great workshop, because I took this last year and I found it really helpful. The ritual in particular was great for me, and I do that. You cannot play enough games before you do your thing. And
you can't play too many, though.
Well, yes, you can. And that was my problem. When you write haiku, you have to condense an idea into 3 lines and still create that word picture for someone. So in reference to Louise's point, there can be a lot said in a little bit, and you have to trust your reader to know what you're trying to tell them. So that's what haiku does for me, and hopefully for other people. And I see a couple of my people in here, Joanne. And so I think that the ability to write succinctly and less is more is just a learning thing. Knowing what to cut and what to keep. Please come along.
Okay. Oh, we've got, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to build.
I just wanted questions here.
I was just going to build on that a little bit. I just finished taking a, it's not really a course, but a teacher with a blog was doing one of Hemingway's stories, just a few lines at a time, and then you discuss it in the comments, and you didn't read ahead because that would be cheating. And the whole story is maybe 400 or 500 words or something. It's not long, but just and doing it that way, it was broken down. You could see like every word, not only was it minimal, but it suggested 16 different things, and you had to kind of decide what that one thing was. And that was, big part of Hemingway's writing, was that very minimalistic writing that when done right is very effective. Yeah.
I see Tessa Soderberg has her hand up, so maybe Tessa, you can ask your question.
Actually, I was just going to comment on the books to read, and somebody at the monthly write-in mentioned the Saves the Cat Writes a Novel by Jessica Brody, and I've been reading it the last couple of days, and it's very handy just for structuring your material. And
what's
for
it called
me,
again?
Save the Cat Writes a Novel.
Yeah, it seems to me I've heard of that, but I've never looked at it.
Well, apparently it was a mechanism used by screenplay writers to write their screenplays.
Oh, okay.
And Jessica Brody, who is the author of this one, took it and adapted it for novels.
Oh, wow.
And she basically divides novels up into sort of 10 different groups, and explains what you need for each novel type. So like the buddy love is one of them, whether it's romance between 2 people or a person and who picks up a dog, and that's their sort of their companion, rather, as opposed to human or whatever. So it doesn't focus strictly on romance. It focuses on relationships. And monster in the house. And yeah, so there's quite like I say, there's 10 of them. And the other author that I would recommend is James Scott Bell. He's got a number of writing books, basics, and the basics of dialogue, the basics of setting, and so on and so forth. So,
oh wow, yeah, that's another one I haven't heard of. Oh, cool. I'm just jotting these down here.
Okay. And
Excellent. Thanks,
looks
Tessa.
like thank you, Tressa. Looks like Tree has their hand up. Tree, can you ask your question?
Yes. When a person has finished a work, where can they start looking for a publisher? Is there
Well,
websites available?
yeah, it depends on what you're writing. Are you writing poetry or short stories or a novel?
I finished a book of short stories. I've also finished a novel based on a true family.
Oh,
And
wow, nice.
it's based in Northern Ontario. Now I'm getting ready to look for a publisher.
Oh, nice. I don't have a whole lot of experience looking for a publisher. I know that for novels, generally speaking, you want to probably find an agent first. And there are lists of agents if you look online. There's, I think the Writers Union of Canada might have a list of agents. But if you just search for
Writers
agents
Union, what did you say? Writers
Union of Canada.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Is there anyone else out there that knows about publishing or agents? Oh, there, Vera's got some insights, I'm sure.
If you have books on your shelf that are similar to what the style of book you are writing, then look to see who published those. Go to the library and look at all those books, and then look in the flyleaf and see who published those, and look and see who the writer's agent is, if that's the way you want to go, because then you already know the agent uses that or has that kind of writing in their portfolio. And the other way is if it's a literary work, the Canadian Association of Small Presses has it's called the Literary Small Press.
Canadian Association of Small
Presses.
Small presses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can do it two ways. You could start at the bottom I would not, but start at the top with the publisher you would like to go with, and then work your way down. And if you get rejected, and then, when you get to the small presses, like here in Sudbury, we have Latitude 46. I know that there's Coach House Books. There's, a whole raft of them. And when you find the one that takes your work, read the contract carefully.
Get a lawyer.
Wow,
I've heard of one particular famous writer who did horror. I'm trying to remember his name, who was rejected a couple of hundred times, and now he's a famous author. And for the life of me, his name won't come to mind. I can see his face, but
I think that's a common occurrence. And also, as far as agents go, until you have a little bit of, I don't know, it's been my understanding that until you have a little bit under your belt, an agent's not going to really want to see you. And then when you don't need an agent, they're all over you.
They're coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to suggest too is that you might want to find places for those short stories on their own, and then quite often you'll have stories that are published, and then you can sort of collect them as a book after. And that's also going to build, like to Vera's point, you know, it's harder to find an agent if you don't have a track record. So if you
Yes.
start publishing those short stories, that's going to help build your track record as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Can I look
Yeah.
online for that, for places to put the short stories?
Oh yeah, there's
Yes.
a lot of places. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, it's Elizabeth here because we've got a lot of questions piling up in the list here.
Oh, okay.
There
get to
is
it.
a website called Submittable. Just Google Submittable Tree. And it's, I can't remember if there's a fee or not, but it will list all, pretty much all the magazines in North America who will take short stories, poems, nonfiction, etc. And you can sort by your category. And so that's another resource that's available. There's a reminder from Laura that we have a workshop specifically on writing rituals on March 3rd with Rhonda Douglas. So there's that. A note from Charles to remind folks that if you do have stories to read and you want to, get up the nerve and share them publicly, we are always looking for readers for our monthly readings. So our next one is in February. So keep an eye out. If you're a Now member, you'll get an email from our administrator, Dawn, asking for readers. So please put up your hand because sometimes, we are looking for readers and we would like some fresh faces.
Yeah, and speaking of
Thank
writing
you very
goals,
much.
Laura, oh, you're welcome.
I was just going to
Go
add
ahead,
on
Graham.
that. I was just going to add on to that, Liz. Speaking of writing goals, that's another goal that you could have is to have something prepared to do a reading. Doing a reading, it's a really interesting experience, and it's one of those experiences that a lot of writers don't get until they start getting published. But that's one of the great things I found about Now is that you do have that experience of getting up and practicing reading in front of people and also getting feedback. People will tell you what they thought afterwards, and especially if you ask them. So yeah, doing one of the reading series, that's a good goal to have as well.
Thank you.
And lots of people, and lots of people have shared names of books and the websites we were just talking about on the chat. So they're linked right there. You can link it and save it on your computer if you can do that. Thank you, Crystal.
Thank you.
See. Laura, Laura, did you want to talk about Rhonda's workshop?
Yeah, Rhonda Douglas, she's based in Ottawa, and she has a website, resilientwriters.com. She runs the Writers Flow Studio, which it's open to membership a few times a year, and they have daily write-in sessions, which they usually start with some sort of ritual, whether it's therapeutic coloring or free drawing or something like that, before they get into actually writing for 45 minutes. She also, the program also has monthly webinars with authors and other experts on writing. And she also, I knew her because I was part of the First Book Finish program, which is how I wrote my first draft of my novel, which is out to beta readers right now. And it's met some fabulous people there, and I highly recommend checking her out. She's a brilliant mentor for anyone who's just starting out.
Did you say her name was?
And Rhonda Douglas. Resilientwriters.com, the website you want to go to.
Yeah,
and those who are
Crystal has
trying
put that
to
in the chat too.
Yeah. Anyone who's like juggling their jobs and children or any other responsibilities or issues in their lives, but want to write and have the, want to get something out there. She is incredibly motivational and has all kinds of great ideas for anybody who's new and experienced writers as well. So I'll put her website in there.
That's
There we
great.
go.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, good questions. Thank you, Tree.
Let me double check.
I don't see any more questions.
I haven't read The Art of X-ray Reading, but I want to read that one.
Yeah, that's the other one. I was trying to remember the name. And while Laura was talking, it gave me a quick second to look it up. That's the one that's one of my favorites as well. Yeah.
Cool.
Oh,
Good to
and
know.
it looks like Annette's leaving. Good night, Annette, in the UK. Wow, it will be late there. Thanks for staying up with
Oh,
us.
she's still there.
I didn't realize she went. There you
Oh,
go.
wow.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Why not? Okay. There we go.
Anyone else with any questions at all?
Not see.
Also,
Nope.
Just a comment. I'm definitely getting back into writing for sure.
Oh,
Woo.
perfect. Well, that's good to hear. That's part of that's part of what this workshop's all about, is to have fun with writing. So yeah. Are you going to enter the contest as well?
I might. I'm definitely going to work on my writing as if I'm going to submit, and then if I actually submit,
Perfect.
maybe I will. Probably, possibly. But the readings, I
Well,
might try to do some of the readings because I'm really chicken about those.
yeah, well, you know what? I always say, the writers get rewarded by, whenever they win an award or whatever, they get rewarded by getting put in front of a billion people and having to talk in front of them. Like, that's not our job. But the reality is that, if you want to promote your work, and it's one of those skills that you have to learn. And, I did it a year or two ago, and it was terrifying, but I'm so glad I did it. And the next time I do it, it's going to be easier. And the next time it's easier and easier and easier. And yeah, just do that. Deep breath and then do it. It's perfect. But yeah, don't worry about submitting right off. Write it first. Like I said in the workshop, write it first and then decide. That's the best way to go about it for sure. Yeah, good luck with it.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? I don't see any more. There's a couple of thank yous in the chat from Jeff Burchell and Lori Lorenowicz. Thanks, everyone. Lots of great information.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for coming out.
Yeah.
Wow, I guess next year I'll have to add some more. I really thought I was doing everyone a favor by leaving all this time for questions.
You did.
Yeah, that's good.
Perfect. Thanks, Tree.
This has been very informative.
Oh, I'm glad you liked it. Thank you.
Maybe if everybody can leave one thing in the comments about what they learned during this presentation, something that they liked or that was unexpected or that they learned, or going forward
Yeah.
an action they're going to do.
That sounds good. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Mhm. Here we go. Oh, everybody's typing now. One true second. Mhm.
There you go. Planned out my morning ritual, 7 a.m. Here I come.
Thanks, Graham. I gotta go. Pizza's waiting.
Ah, okay. Well, thanks for coming in, Phil. Good to see you
All right.
again. Yep.
Bye.
Bye, Phil.
Have good pizza. Oh. Those cookies are always popular. Well, we're getting a wide range. I'm glad that
Ah,
I'm glad that a lot of it is resonating with people. That's good.
oh, there's the contest calendar.
Oh, there you go.
Oh,
Nice,
that's a good
nice.
one.
Yeah. Oh, lock your door. Yeah, that's always good. Yeah, to have fun and play. That's one of the big things. I think if you can play and have fun with writing, it's going to be way easier, and you're going to be way more productive. That's for sure.
Mhm.
I also thought the goal setting, the writing session, the first one was pretty good too. My new writing goal is to write for either 1 hour every weekday or 2 hours on Saturday and 2 hours on Sunday. I want to try
Oh,
to
there you
make
go.
weekends for off time.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's good. Well, I'm also going to put in, I hope, that link to the that newsletter that I started. It was directly linked to the workshop that I did last year. I mean, obviously this is too, but after I did that workshop, I thought, you know what, there's a lot of stuff here that we could probably talk about. So I'll put that link in there as well.
Okay.
That should be it. Yeah, and so coming up.
Yeah, it's showing up.
Is it perfect? Yeah, so is some of the stuff that we covered here will be in that, but there's going to be other stuff that didn't, and vice versa. It's kind of a space. It's going to have a lot more room to expand on some of these ideas and touch on ideas that we didn't get to. So yeah, I just launched that in November. It took a long time, a lot of planning to get it done. Yeah, so if anyone's interested in that.
Okay.
Well, there you go. Coffee.
Shall we wrap
Yeah.
up? Yeah. First thing in
Well,
the morning.
I'm here all night, so whatever. Yeah. Is there anything else in particular that people want to talk about at all? Even if it's not questions?
Actually, it's me again. I would like to throw in Quick Brown Fox, which is a site run by Brian Henry. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but on that site, for tree in particular, there are agents and what they're looking for. There are writing opportunities, like he has a contest line. There are a book of all the contests that are done annually. I think he puts it out. And he also does, he has a lot of connections. So if you have writing and if you go to one of his workshops, and he does them online and in person when it's allowable, he will give you, the in on certain places you can send work, especially if he's heard it and he thinks it will fit. So
Quick Brown Fox. What did you say his name was, Vera?
Brian Henry.
Oh, thank you very much, Vera.
Welcome.
Yeah, that's good information.
All right. Well, we're starting to lose folks. Some people are having to leave. So I don't see any more
I'd
questions.
just like to ask about editing aids. I have started using something called Pro Writing Aid, and I found it very helpful. I don't know what other people are using.
I'm not familiar with that one. Is it?
I can speak to that one.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thanks,
Yeah,
Laura.
because I use it. Yeah, I use Pro Writing Aid. I
Mhm.
find that if it's good if you have some sort of confidence in your grammar and writing skills for those who have the imagination, but maybe not the technical confidence.
Mhm.
It's not the best program because the suggestions aren't always relevant or good. You have to, it takes a lot of judgment, I think, to figure out whether what the program suggests is actually what's right for what you're doing.
That's what I
So,
found too.
yeah. I mean, like, I'm of the age where we were drilled in grammar in school, right?
Yes.
So
Mhm.
I can look at it and go, yeah, no, that doesn't work. But someone who isn't, well, you know, and it could make your writing just sound totally dry. So it's good. It's good if you know how to use it, basically, is how I look at it.
Keep telling me to replace fisherman with fisher person or server. Or
And I write
waitress or waitress with
historical
server.
fiction, so that's not relevant.
I know.
That's basically it. If
Waitress,
it's not
server.
relevant, then
Mhm.
just ignore it. That's
Yeah.
about the best way to use it.
Yeah, I think I was drilled in grammar like you. So
Yeah.
is there another one you've used that you like?
That's the only one I use, but I know there's more than one. Isn't there Hemingway or something like that?
Mhm.
And
I've used Hemingway. They want you to shorten every sentence. And you end up with today's writing style, which is all really short sentences, so your people don't get bored. But you will lose a lot of your story that way. So you have to judge for yourself what you want to give up and what you don't. But the good thing about Hemingway is they will they'll tag adjectives and awkward sentences and things like that. So, you know, for a new writer, it's really good. For someone who's experienced, it probably is a pain in the butt.
doesn't sound much different than Pro Writing Aid. I think there's also
Yeah.
Grammarly as well. That's
Yes.
another one.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was going to ask about that one. I didn't
haven't
know if
tried
that
that
falls in the
myself.
same. No.
I find that if you're working on a word processor and you make changes, sometimes you'll make errors, leave half a sentence in or have duplicate words, and it'll pick that all out for you to save you time.
Are you talking about Grammarly?
No, I'm not Pro
Or just
Writing
Word
Aid.
in general.
Oh,
Writing
okay.
Word and Google Docs in general.
There's
Yeah.
something called Scrimshaw as well.
I've never
Or
heard of
something.
that.
Sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah, vaguely familiar, exactly.
I've never used it, but Scrivener has a feature. I'll put a link in if
Scriven?
it's like for the article. The program Scrivener. It's a writing processor, but it's
yeah.
it's really good. I absolutely love it. It's the whole reason I own a Mac. But it's amazing because it's good for like novels and really long documents that a Word document wouldn't be able to handle.
Mhm.
But one of the features it has is revision or editing, where you can like it'll go through your writing and it'll pick out all the different patterns that you use. So if you tend to overuse this word, or you use too many ands, or too much of this or too much of that, and it's a way of filtering it out. I've never used it because I've never really gotten to that late stages of editing. I'm always like stuck at the second or third draft. I never get to the line edit part of it. For poetry, I do. In poetry, it would be crazy to use this for poetry. But for novels and stuff, that could be something that maybe you'd like to look into. If you're into novels. Yeah, it's called Scrivener.
Scrivener.
Yeah, that's the name of the program. It's an amazing program.
I will look it up. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Also available for PC. I have it on my PC and my Mac. So.
Yeah. I found working on a word processor, you do make certain errors. And when you read back over it, sometimes your mind just goes over the errors.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah.
I put a website in the comments, writingmastery.com. It's about $12 a month. It is run by Jessica Brody of Save the Cat Writes a Novel. And it is various courses for $12 a month, which I think is brilliant price, about how to write, how to outline and write a book according to the Save the Cat, how to edit. I just finished her editing course, and I think it's fabulous. It just helped me so much. And how to brainstorm a book, what to do once your book is done, like how to get it published, how to find an agent, all kinds of courses like that. And really, for the money, I think that's a really good price, real bang for your buck. So
I have to ask, I'm super curious, Laura, do you prefer Scrivener for Mac or PC? Like, have you noticed a lot of differences in functionality between the two?
It's been a while since I've used my Mac. My battery's swollen, so I kind of I took my mom's old PC and use that now. I don't know. I guess I've used it more for PC, and but I'm still not overly convinced by the program yet. The good thing is that it's just one lump sum. It's not a subscription service. So you buy it and you got it, which is great instead of paying month by month. But I'm not totally convinced that it's for me. I end up going back to Word and Google Docs every time. It's just, I don't know, too many bells and whistles, and I'm just a very bare bones basic person, I guess, and I'm not overly I don't need all that extra stuff. I don't know, that's just that, but that's personal preference.
Yeah,
you know, I know some people rave to the skies about Scrivener, but yeah, I just have never been totally convinced by it, even though I did my entire NaNoWriMo on it. I just I don't know.
Yeah, I love
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I love the idea of Scrivener, and I tried using it, and you know, I have nothing against it. It just wasn't working for me. I'm like Laura, it's just give me Word again, or even better, Word Perfect. That would be even better.
Ooh, black screen with green letters.
Exactly.
5 1/4 inch discs. Yes.
Exactly.
No, I just found when I moved to a word processor, I started to make certain errors, and I have to find something. So I've got this 30-day thing with Writing Pro Aid, and it's been pretty helpful.
Oh, nice.
Oh yeah.
But you're right, you have to be careful.
Another thing, when I'm editing, a little trick that I'll use is I don't normally indent when I'm writing, but when I'm editing, sometimes what I'll do is I'll indent it. And it's weird, but like you were talking about, Tree, about, you know, you just go over your errors. For some reason, with that indentation, it shifts everything, and all of a sudden you're not going over those mistakes. All of a sudden they're popping out. Not all of them, but you know, things are popping out, and you're seeing things that you didn't see before. That's what I find anyway. And all it is just by indenting all the paragraphs, because it shifts the words.
A couple of suggestions to add to that. Number one, when you're going through, you're doing your editing, change the font.
That's a good one too. Yeah. And font size.
Even if it's something like Comic Sans Serif or something like that. Change the font and everything looks totally different. For some weird reason. And another thing is I always read it out loud. And there's also the spoken thing part in Word. You can get it can talk for you. It's kind of weird, robotic voice, but I always read out loud when I'm doing my page edits, because I catch a lot more that way.
Yeah, those are good too. Yeah.
Oh, well, I have to go. I've been at this since 7 this morning.
Oh, geez.
Oh, dear.
Very nice evening. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming out. Yeah, that's great.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Tree.
Bye. There's nothing else in the chats.
Nothing else in the chats.
I have to go as well. Thank you very much. Appreciate the comments and the input. Okay, enjoy it. Just one last comment. I find very often that I've got the end of the story, then I have to build better backwards. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it gets a bit weird, but somebody else did that, but I can't remember who the author was, but he always had the ending and he built there. So that's
Yeah.
very often a lot of the way my writing starts and goes
Well,
from
it's
there.
interesting because a lot of times, you know, you get a story and I think automatically your mind goes, well, what's the end going to be? And then you have that. And like you say, you kind of work backwards sometimes.
Backwards
but,
on it, yeah.
Yeah,
But anyway, it keeps life interesting.
it
Okay,
does.
again, thank you, folks. It's been a pleasure. Hope we do it
Thank you,
again.
Frank. Yeah. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Nino Ricci said, if you don't know where you're going, you can't write the story. So he always writes the ending first.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Yeah, if the ending comes to me, I'll write it down, but I don't expect it to. So, yeah. But again, there's different ways to do it. There's as many different ways as there are writers. Everyone does it differently. So, yeah.
Yeah. He did a workshop here in Sudbury and he told us that he writes the entire story out in longhand, 70 pages or thereabouts,
Wow.
then writes the novel. And you
Jeez.
know who said something similar to that was Terry Fallis.
Yeah. Yeah. He does a lot of planning. Yeah. He spends, I think, more time planning than he does actually writing.
He
Yeah.
writes like an engineer,
He does.
basically,
Wow.
which he is.
Which he is. I was going to say,
Yeah.
funny that.
Really plans things out.
Yeah, exactly. But that works for him, you know, and
Yeah.
again, you know, whatever works for everyone. So, yeah.
Well, I write like an OCD person.
Squirrel.
I'm squaring up my pages.
I do that for poetry. I write the rhyme scheme on the left hand. It looks like a mathematical formula, the way that I have it. And I have my how many syllables I want for each line. So I have I make it into a worksheet, and then I write sonnet sequences. So I have that for each sonnet that's going to go into the sequence. And then I have another page that's completely separate that has like the answers or the meaning of it. And then that would be like the prose part of it. And then I take that and then I convert it into the sonnet, and then I keep chipping away at it and edit until I get like the words perfect and I get everything all fine-tuned down. And then I have like the number sign on the side for how many lines it's going to have, and the rhyme scheme it's got to follow at the end and stuff. It's very cool.
Yeah,
it's fun. It's fun.
I led a group and I gave them Triolet, which is really not super complicated, and it's only 7 lines. So, but we all had to write the rhyme scheme down because it's a hard one. You know, it's a repeating A, B, small b. I forget it now, but anyway, yeah, if you don't write it down, you're lost.
What is it?
But it was
called?
interesting. Sorry?
What is it called?
Triolet. Yeah,
Triolet.
Triolet. Triolet.
Okay, I'll try to find that. I've never heard of that.
They're interesting and they're just snappy little things, and they do have a point. Like there is meant to be a point at the end of them. So
how do you spell that?
Triolet. Triolet. You have to put some kind of poetic reference there, or you might get something you don't want. No?
There's an incorporation. It's a seminar registration. I
Well,
don't think it's not a.
Wait.
Maybe
I know I
Triolet
have
poetry?
Well, Triolet
Triolet.
poem. Triolet, yeah. If you put in Triolet poem, you will find Triolet. It's Triolet to me, but it's 8 lines. See, I've forgotten already.
There's so many poetry forms. It's hard to keep them all straight.
It's 8 lines? Why would it be 8 lines? I could see 3, I could see 9.
It's AB, small a, large a, small a, and it's a repeating line.
Oh,
the first line repeats in the fourth line, and the 5th, 6th, 7th line, and then B, the second big line, repeats in the second line and the ending line. So confusing, but lovely.
Wow. Yeah.
That's like a rondeau, I think it is. I did that for like the cycles of life, but the you have like your first stanza, which would be like your first poem, and then each of those lines they basically trickle down like a waterfall, and then they repeat through all the different ones.
I think the most challenging I've done is a crown sonnet, and I almost took up drinking.
Oh, really?
It's hard. I like them, but anyway, enough about poetry.
Because you have to have the sentence, if it's going to repeat, it has to have a good reason to repeat. Otherwise, it's just either boring or annoying.
Yeah. Well, some of those trailers can be very annoying too. And I wrote one that says, I am not short, nor am I tall. I can be lifted up to see. And that line repeats. And I'm 4 feet tall. So, you know, it was self-identifying for me.
Yeah. Pretty cool. I have to get back into poetry. I really have to.
Everyone really must. And please come to the writing on Wednesday, what's the date? The 19th. We can talk about poetry there.
Yes, it's in my calendar. I have it written down. I'm going to do lots of writing in 2022. That's my big goal.
Good. Yeah. Well, that's something you should talk about though, Graham, in your next workshop is sticking to your single focus, because I write a lot of different genres as well. And I write short story, poetry, haiku, and it gets, you know, pretty soon maybe you have to focus on a day a week where you're going to do poetry, and a day a week when you're going to do that damn novel. And Marlene, do you have a system?
I have no system, but I'm really enjoying this discussion on poetry. And this is one area of my life where I need to know the underlying structure. So I'm hastily taking notes. You know, I want to crack the poetry nut somehow.
Oh, it's fun. It's fun.
I'm with her.
all you need to write a poetry is you can either choose either free form, which would be like a miniature novel, which is there's no form, you just throw words on a page, or you can use like a form where you try to follow like a structure, and you try to get all these free words into like some kind of a structure. So it's like building a house. Literally, you need to follow a plan. Like you have to have right angles and all this kind of stuff. So you just need to decide between those two, and you just need a thesaurus. And I used to use a paper thesaurus. And you do the same thing for editing and regular writing, where you have like a word and, you know, the brown dog is walking. It's kind of a boring sentence, but with a thesaurus, or what Graham is saying about like, you try to improve it through editing and stuff. And then the sentence becomes really interesting. So then you just have a thesaurus and you just go to town and just have fun.
Yeah, it's the words that I have the words. Like when you were saying the brown dog, I was going, the shit colored mutt.
And there's nothing wrong
if I've
with
offended everybody, but I've spent my day with a 6-year-old. So, you know, like I have the words and I write them down, and I'm thinking, well, is this a poem or is it like I can't decide. So it's kind of like in the middle. It's kind of at poetry and limbo, maybe. Yeah.
But I don't think you should be deciding on your own work whether it's poetry or not. Because when you've written something down, if it has intention and it has emotion, then someone will relate to it, because we all have this common experience, you know. Sorry, that was me stirring the pot.
That's your stirring the pot.
And I'm just picturing your short self with this witch's hat and this poetry brew. These words are coming out, little haikus are floating, so I can get a visual from that.
Well, in fairness, I'm 4'8". So
okay.
You know what? I have written poems, not this one, but I really love the name of this poem form. It's called Guzzle. And I have not written one, but I want to, just because I want to stand in front of the crowd I'm reading to and say, I'm going to read you this guzzle now.
Guzzle.
Does everyone
How do you
go
spell
chug,
that?
chug, chug, chug?
Let's hope. And you know, Graham, you talked about reading in front of people, and I used to have anxiety, and I read at Wordstock this year for the first time in front of a live audience as
Oh,
poet
wow.
laureate. And that was my first applause. And I'm telling you now, it is addictive. And you know, when you hear it and you think, oh, I'm like Sally Field, they're like me, they're really like
They
me.
really like me. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's good to do those things because, you know, that's really gratifying.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I when you said guzzle, I didn't recognize off the bat. I
There
talked
you
to yeah,
Thank you,
I
Crystal.
interviewed a prof
There we
from
go,
Lakehead
yes.
at one point. I think he was an engineering prof or something too. But anyway, he had a book of guzzles come out. That's why I was
Yeah.
interviewing him. So yeah, and it's I guess it's a pretty old form of poetry as well.
It is. You know who has a really good book with all kinds of different forms is Bruce Meyer. I think I have the book. I'm not sure, but he wrote a book a few years ago with all the old true forms of poetry, and his opinion was that if you don't know how to write in true form, then you're shorting yourself as a poet. And you know, I kind of agree with that.
Yep, me too.
Because
a
if you
good
get a
discipline.
built-in structure, then you know where you're going. It's
Exactly.
hard. So.
And it also pays homage to all the previous people who came before and just learning about their craft and then trying to build on it.
Yeah, which leads us to spoken word, which is not just about anger. You shouldn't just get up there and rant. All right, it's time for me to take drugs. Hi, Louise. It's nice to see you again. And I will be back. You know my
Yes.
date, the 19th and the 25th.
Yep.
I'll be here till Thursday. No. Night, everybody. Thank you,
We'll see you
Graham.
then. Yeah, no
Yeah,
problem. Thanks,
thanks,
you, Vera.
Elizabeth.
Yeah,
Bye, Vera.
yeah. Take care.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Hi,
bye
Vera.
for now.
Bye.
Oh, she's fun. Well,
I think I'll take off too. This is pretty amazing.
Yeah, this was a good night. Yeah, yeah. I'm glad I like these
Yeah.
kind of discussions. I like having room for these kind of discussions. We can go into 17 million
Rum?
different directions. So, what's that?
did
Rum
you
is
say
good.
rum?
Did I say rum? Not yet.
You said rum. And you let the poets take over. Oh, bless your heart.
Sorry.
Well, it's all about writing. Doesn't matter what kind of writing. It's all about
That's
writing.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yes.
Well,
Okay. Have a good night, everybody.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Crystal.
okay.
So,
All right.
We'll see you later.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.
That was great.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
I'm gonna go
I guess
to.
I'm gonna end. All right.
Nope.
Bye.
Is that
Bye,
Gail?
Jodine.
Bye, Jodine.
Oh, that's
And I'll be leaving
Quietly
soon
sitting
too,
here.
after 10 days off and your first day back at work. My eyeballs are falling out.
Oh, geez.
So yeah.
oh dear, yes.
That'll do
Yeah,
it.
but first day back at work, so it was kind of busy. So
Okay.
I'm glad to be back. I
guess I can
was
stop
kind of off in
recording
between
here.
Christmas and since September, but I missed this, so it's just a refocusing and you know.